So we have Ryan, am I saying your name correctly? Pawlikowski? Okay, and Morgan Niccoli? Niccoli. Oh, I was so close. Apologies for not checking on that earlier. So Morgan is a senior ecologist with Arcadis, and she has over a decade of experience in transportation ecology across the Southeast. She currently manages ecology initiatives for the Georgia Department of Transportation. And then Ryan is an ecology section manager with the Georgia Department of Transportation. He specializes in developing avoidance and minimization strategies for protected species across the Southeast, both at state and local levels. So they both will be presenting on the Georgia BAT Programmatic Agreement, as well as lessons learned from that process. So thank you both for being here.
I think that'll do. Hopefully. Yeah. All right. You can take a. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, we're going to be talking to you today about Georgia's BAT Programmatic Agreement and lessons learned. A little overview. We're going to go through which BATs are found in Georgia, why there was a programmatic need, and the process in developing this BAT programmatic. And then Ryan is going to talk to you about the successes after the first year of implementation, as well as some lessons learned, hoping that you can learn from our experiences. So in Georgia, there are 16 bat species. 4 have a federal listing status. 1 has a state listing status. But in Georgia, whether you have a federal listing, a state listing species, or you are a non-listed species, you have protection under Georgia state law. In September of 2022, tricolor bat was proposed for listing. And this was an issue for GDOT and its agency partners because the tricolor bat's range is throughout the state of Georgia. And with this, projects would need to complete formal Section 7 consultation if there were any tree clearing. So Georgia has a very large transportation program. A lot of projects are evaluated annually by the Office of Environmental Services. And so that would be a lot of projects and a lot of time spent on formal Section 7 consultation. And so we needed an avenue to be able to streamline regulatory coordination. So with this PA, we were hoping to reduce the number of projects that needed, what's that word? I'm going to move on. That we were going to streamline regulatory coordination, so reduce the amount of time our agencies needed to review our projects. And we are also going to give us the opportunity to provide a consistent process for GDOT personnel and consultants. So rather than our practitioners having to reinvent the wheel, figuring out which AMMs were applicable to their project on every single project, we were able to save time by creating that process. In addition, we wanted to create predictable AMMs for each project. Prior to the BAT programmatic, although most of the time the AMMs were similar, sometimes they would be tweaked or changed depending on the project. And that created a lot of confusion with practitioners, as well as some frustration with other offices. And so we created a collaborative programmatic agreement. And so for GDOT, they really wanted to have an expedited schedule so that they had an executed agreement prior to the listing of tricolor bat. We were successful since it's executed and tricolor bat is not listed yet. But anyways, with this expedited schedule, there were challenges, which Ryan is going to talk about. But we met bi-weekly with our working group for over a year. Our working group included all of our agency partners that were going to be signatories. So that's Federal Highway Administration, Georgia Division, as well as their resource office, which they were incredibly helpful. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Savannah District, Fish and Wildlife Service, Georgia Field Office, and then our Georgia DNR, Wildlife Resources Division. The document is a BA and BO. It was completed simultaneously, which helped with that expedited schedule. And the BAT Programmatic was executed in December of 2023. It was then implemented and available for practitioners the following spring and April of 2024. The scope includes all potential GDOT project types. So it was really important for everyone involved that there was a little bit of open-endedness if possible. So we have our projects that very easily fall within the scope, but if your project was complicated, a little bit different, we have an avenue available within the PA for folks to be able to reach out to agencies for technical assistance, as well as providing project information, working with our agency partners to figure out how to stay within the scope if possible. All bats in Georgia, no matter if you had a federal or state listing status or you were a non-listed species, is included within the PA. And because those non-listed bat species still have protection, it was important that we created a process for them as well. So in Georgia, it happens where a large maternity roost of non-listed bats are found on a transportation structure, whether that's during the pre-construction survey or during under construction. And prior to the BAT Programmatic, there was a lot of scrambling with trying to figure out how to handle that situation. And so we wanted to have a process for that, so all parties involved knew what to do. We have standardized avoidance and minimization measures, again, creating that predictability for all parties, as well as formal Section 7 consultations included for federally protected species. Okay, and now Ryan's going to talk about successes.
Thank you so much, Morgan, and welcome everyone. So GDOT's program has found a lot of success using the BAT Programmatic so far over the past year. We've had improved agency partnerships across all of our collaborators who helped participate in this agreement. We've reduced special provisions from bid contracts. So GDOT has a program where we can put extra conditions on contractors when they go out and construct a project. And through the BAT Programmatic, we've been able to reduce those by incorporating some of the AMMs into our pre-let and design phase processes, where if we reduce the special provisions, that helps the project get done faster, and also bid prices go down on our projects. We've also had 24 to 48-hour response times for under construction projects. As Morgan mentioned, some of that is because we've established SOPs for what's going to happen when contractors find bats on bridges. We can do everything right. We can go out and do multiple pre-construction surveys, find no evidence of bats, and bats are mobile. They might just particularly find that bridge very attractive at that point in the year. So they might move in, and we've had really great efforts from not just internal GDOT staff, from our consultant community, from our agency partners to respond within 24 to 48 hours to limit the delay that contractors have once they find bats on a bridge. We've also purchased 2 properties, and I don't think we touched on this before, but the BAT Programmatic also included a conservation fund for bats that GDOT is voluntarily paying into. And we purchased 2 properties so far with the funds from that agreement, and they're identified in the State Wildlife Action Plan. The latest property was about 2,200 acres. That's in full permanent protection. It's going to be monitored by the Department of Natural Resources and utilized as a natural area. So that's permanent protection for bats in the state working towards recovery. But mainly why we're here today is not just to say, hey, this was, completely successful. GDOT is also following that same workflow for creating this collaborative programmatic agreement right now. And if you missed it earlier in the week, Matt Carroll, who's in the audience, and Morgan had an excellent presentation on an aquatic programmatic we're taking the same pathway for. But we wanted to come with you with lessons learned after our first year. It's great to say, hey, this was a wonderful process. We did it. It's working. But how do we get there? And what are some of the stumbling blocks that we had? Because we want you to be able to take this back to your states and implement it at the same level. So the first thing I think makes a lot of sense, but we didn't really consider how many technical assistance requests we would get once we rolled this out to practitioners. And we thought we did everything right. We, had some PSAs, we had some education and outreach. We really found that we had an overwhelming number from not just GDOT ecologists from our agencies, but the hundreds of consultants we worked with as well, who said, hey, I don't feel quite, confident yet applying this programmatic. Can you help me make sure that, I checked all the boxes? So creating a user's guide is critical. Typically, the federal government does that with most of their programmatics as well. We were very focused because of the tight time frame to get the actual programmatic signed and out the door, because we were trying to meet that initial listing date for tricolored bat, that we had to wait to do the user's guide until after we were done. And that made it really difficult for practitioners who don't want to read, hundreds of pages of a legal document, essentially, to figure out what the heck do I do on this bridge replacement project. So creating a user's guide where you can pare that down to just simple workflows, charts, graphs, that your practitioners who may not be familiar with bats or bat ecology can apply it to their projects. We also established some interagency virtual office hours where we could sit in a room with our Fish and Wildlife Service representatives. And if anyone had a question, they could come hop in and, basically have an open forum to say, hey, I have this specific project need. And for GDOT, that was great because I was receiving hundreds of requests to figure out what they should do on projects. And then also people were going straight to the service. And so to make sure that we had a combined front of what to do on each project, having those virtual office hours was really key to also, make sure I wasn't in meetings basically every second of the day. Last up was interagency coordination meetings and setting those up to establish a pathway for just some feedback. Is this working? Once we implemented it, are there anything that we can tweak? Maybe not in the agreement itself, but one of the agency responses we had was that our transmittal letters for projects that went over to agencies weren't exactly, tipping them off to the action they needed to take on a project. And so we just had slight tweaks to our transmittal letters that made the process way easier for all of our agency partners. Coordinating your AMM rollout, setting your expectations for project implementation is key. We had a big signing ceremony. Hey, we did it. We said, we got this bat programmatic out the door. And what happened is immediately the next day, I got calls from our construction staff, from district engineers going, wait, we had this agreement done. I thought I wasn't going to have tree clearing restrictions on this project anymore. And, explaining that, well, we already completed our consultation months ago. That was not part of this agreement. And we can't, we're not going to go back because our program's so big. And it's not instantaneous. Once that programmatic signed, it doesn't mean that everything's fixed. It means that starting from then, 3 months from now, all of your documents are going to see the benefits of this. And so setting those expectations just internally, it might seem simple, but I was overwhelmed a little bit with how much response we got from really all parts of GDOT and our contractor saying, well, I heard about this great thing and it's not on my project yet. And so kind of having that upward, talks to folks in the agency that this isn't immediate, but you will realize benefits very soon. Also, clear delineation of which AMMs are pre and post let. GDOT, as a part of this agreement, moved a lot of our contractor provisions, things we might put in special provisions, into a pre-let phase. We were doing our surveys pre-let. We changed our actual design policy manuals to meet parts of this agreement so that it wouldn't have to be considered under construction on individual projects. Every project now had to do this, and we didn't have to put it on the contractor. It was just, hey, design these differently in pre-let. But when we rolled it out to practitioners, they, weren't in the room for 2 years every week where it happened. And they didn't necessarily understand all the nuances of, hey, we just, virtually changed how all projects are designed. You don't have to put that special provision on projects. So we had a few going out at the beginning months where they didn't necessarily need to be applied to projects because they were universally, working for GDOT. So just a thought on that as well. We also established multiple SOPs for different project scenarios. You need to really create, these dichotomous keys, these workflows for your practitioners who most of them are not, they're not going to have lots of, background information on bats. That might not be their specialty. At GDOT, we have lots of in-house ecologists, and maybe 3 of us are really integrated into the bat program. So having kind of these workflows that are simple of, hey, you're doing a bridge replacement project. Did you find bats? Yes or no? Have you done a survey within 2 years? Yes or no? And then it kind of spits out, here's what you should do in those scenarios is really key. Because also we work with lots of consultants, hundreds of consultants. And then also at the same time, our districts, other staff within the office need to go look at that. Under construction, we had different obligations for contractors and kind of having that, workflows as well for under construction projects. What happens when something goes wrong? Who does the contractor contact? Is it GDOT? Is it an agency? Who's expected to respond, and how long is that response going to take? Is very critical because we don't want to slow down construction projects. We also need program-wide educational outreach. And that could be, hey, we talked to all of our ecologists. Here's how you're going to implement this. But what about our NEPA analysts? They have to incorporate that into their documents. We had an issue where our state wasn't set up yet to incorporate programmatic formal Section 7 into our PCEs. They actually had to elevate their document type, which they weren't exactly happy about up front, but they were able to talk to Federal Highway and kind of reconsider what was included in their PCE agreement. So those are kind of things that I didn't consider because I'm not a NEPA practitioner. But having that, kind of inter-office communication, but as well as communication with your districts, your contractors, of what to expect. And one of the coolest things that's happened recently was I actually had our overall bridge maintenance engineer call me and say, hey, I was talking to a district construction engineer, and they told me something about this special provision that just didn't sound quite right. And they were, how they interpreted it. And I told them they should do it this way. Was that right? And I was like, yes, that was exactly right. And that's our bridge maintenance engineer. He, has no specialty in bats. He's not a biologist. But because we had that outreach and overall communication, he was actually able to bring up an issue that he saw under construction, and we were able to fix it before it happened. And so outreach is critical. We do have one issue where projects with no federal nexus are still, a challenge. This agreement is mainly looking at lead federal agencies, whether it's at the Corps or Federal Highway. But we still have projects in our program that have no lead federal nexus. And so we can't exactly use this agreement into its, full portion. And part of that is because we can't use our bat conservation fund. If you say, hey, I'm going to pay into the bat conservation fund, you're assuming that you may have take on the species, even though it's, not completely like we could go out there and do studies and find that out. So we do still have a few AMMs we have to implement that aren't necessarily on our federal side of our program, on just a pure state funded side. So in conclusion, I just want to throw this out there. You need to establish working relationships with your agencies before you ever try and undertake an agreement like this. Start small. GDOT started with our joint coordination procedures, which just outlines very basic things. How are we going to do technical assistance? How does GDOT do early coordination? How do we write our documents? And then we, stepped up into a programmatic no effect agreement. What projects can we all agree upon as agencies that won't have an effect on natural resources? And then build up into this, hey, we're going to cover the whole state, every project under formal Section 7. You need to have those relationships established first for your agencies to be receptive to even working with you. You also need to identify your desired outcomes of the PA, which sounds simple, but when you really start to think about it, we started with just bridge maintenance projects. Can we cover bridge maintenance? And then it's like, oh, well, it doesn't quite fit that. And we ballooned into this. We just need to cover the whole program. And that might not be right for you, but having a clear scope of what you want to cover is really beneficial to also know who needs to be in the room for those talks and to complete your consultation. You need to create an implementation plan. We talked about that, getting the user's guide out there, doing your public outreach, but then also follow up, provide guidance and training once your PA is available. Your practitioners are going to need help for a while. And so you need kind of defined points of contact, whether it's at your agency, your partner resource agencies, of who can take those technical assistance requests and keep projects moving. And with that, Morgan and I will take any questions and appreciate your time this morning.
Great, thanks so much, Morgan and Ryan, for sharing the process and lessons learned from Georgia. Yes, real quick, Deb, are there any questions online?
Not at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
So how does your state programmatic work with the national Fed Highway Programmatic?
That is a wonderful question. And so one of the impetuses for this agreement in the first place was that GDOT frequently got kicked out of the national programmatic. Most of our projects didn't fall within the original version, not the one that just came out. And so we wanted to take a state approach because we could actually consult on the specific project types GDOT's undertaking and what we could commit to as in terms of an agency. And so even with the national programmatic that just came out, we have several benefits of, we do have formal Section 7 covered for basically all action types. Exclusions aren't covered in the national programmatic, but we have them covered in ours. And so we really have streamlined any BAT related things from we could potentially have 135 days of consultation to now everything is either 14 days or 21. And we kind of have agreed conditions with each agency of what we need to do.
What did your training look like for your NEPA analysts to understand this process? Because we, I'm main DOT, and we have been having some issues trying to get our NEPA analysts to understand our new consultation process with federal highway and just kind of looking for options to get them on the same page.
Yep. So I had 3 different training sessions with them. The first one was just under development. I actually went and they have regular section meetings every month. And so I went to their section meeting and said, hey, just a heads up, this is coming down the pipeline. They're not, ESA specialists and things like that. And so it was just a forum to ask questions like, hey, we're trying to work out this agreement. The next one was, we're putting this in place. And, here's what to expect from us. And that's where I found out they were like, well, shoot, we're going to have to elevate our, document types. And I didn't consider that. That was something that's outside the realm of my expertise. And so we had that back and forth. And the third one was the same way. I went to their section meeting and said, okay, what problems are you having? Because they started receiving comments from Federal Highway that we didn't anticipate, but it was only on their NEPA documents. The ecology side was wrapped up. It was perfect. But then Federal Highway had comments on the NEPA side of how they included their documentation. So we had to actually workshop language that, met the BPA, but also fit into the NEPA document where they could just kind of copy paste into each one and then ran it up to the agency. So it was mostly just literally meeting with them, and they do their meetings face to face. And so it was a little bit easier for them to ask questions. But also, having feedback from me of like, well, yeah, I didn't consider that. Let's go back to the drawing board and how can we figure it out together?
Once again, last question.
Well, it's right at the end. I was curious what the funding mechanism was to put all the time into creating this programmatic, and also sort of how you thought through how to promote this internally at GDOT to, actually expend the time and energy to do a statewide programmatic for your bats.
A lot of extra hours and personal, just trying to get the program through while also working on this. But I will say GDOT has a very robust, outside of, my internal hours, GDOT has a very robust interagency office of, we call it the Interagency Office of Environmental Quality, where we have transportation liaisons at all of our partner agencies. And so DNR has positions, Federal Highway has positions, the Corps has positions, Fish and Wildlife Service has positions. And so we were able to call in that funding agreement essentially to, provide hours on their side. Internally, it was mostly just me doing extra work. And, how we marketed that towards our upper management of why is this important? One was, I don't want to say like scare tactics, but just to say, hey, when tricolor bats listed, we're looking at, previously we just had federal bats across the top 1/3 of our state. Now every single project in the state could have a formal consultation. That's a very real reality. And not only can GDOT not handle that, having to write, BAs, the Fish and Wildlife Service can't handle hundreds and hundreds of BOs to review. Our program would basically stop. So we utilize that as, hey, time savings efficiency, but also cost savings efficiency of we can make these voluntary payments into the Bat Conservation Fund, which would help benefit, in theory, the recovery of the species. So at some point in the future, we won't have to do this at all. That's the end goal for, I think the Fish and Wildlife Service, DNR. But also we were able to utilize that to help also minimize AMMs on certain projects where we could have reduced seasonal restrictions and things like that. So it was kind of a time is money. And we were able to pitch that to upper management, and they were wholly supportive.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.